Okay, today's lesson is on simplifying radicals. And in order to do well in this unit, we need to be able to simplify radicals that are maybe not perfect squares. So first we want to think about what numbers are perfect squares. So when I think about 1 times 1, of course I get 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3, 9. 4 times 4, 5 times 5. 6 times 6, 7 times 7, 8 times 8, 9 times 9, 10 times 10, 11 times 11, 12 times 12, 13 times 13, 14 times 14, 15 times 15. So the first 15 perfect squares you need to memorize. Okay, some things are just easier if you memorize. So when I look at 392, it's not going to be in my list because 16 times 16 is 256. 17 times 17 is 289. And 18 times 18, I think, is 324. And I can't remember 19 times 19. And 20 times 20 is 400. Let me just look up 19 squared. So if I go 19 times 19, just to make this complete, I get 361. So I can tell by looking at this that 392 is not a perfect square. So in order to simplify this, I'm going to say, well, 2 goes into 392 because I do see that it is an even number. So just to break it down a little bit, I can say 2 goes into 392. Let's see, 196. 196 is in my perfect squares. What times itself equals 196? That's right, it's 14. So 14 comes out of the radical sign and the 2 has to stay in. 14 root 2 is the square root of 392 simplified. So let's see, what is the square root of 200? Well, of course we know 200 is 2 times 100. And 100 is a perfect square, so I can take the square root of 100, which is 10, take it outside, but this 2 right here, this has to stay in. So 10 root 2 is the same thing as radical or square root of 200 squared. 144, that's in our list right there. So I know that what number times itself equals 144? 12. 196, that's in our list. What number times itself is 196? That's right, 14. Okay, number 5 says 3 times the square root of 150. So this means 3 times the square root, and I know quarters go into $1.50, so 25 times, and it takes 6 quarters to make 150 pennies. The reason I say that is 25 is a perfect square. So this means I'm going to take that 5 out, put it in front, and multiply it by what's already there. 3 times 5, and radical 6 has to stay in. So 3 times 5 is 15 root 6. Okay, number 6 is similar that way. I have a negative 2 out in front, and 45 is the same as 9 times 5. And the reason I write 9 times 5 is 9 is a perfect square. The square root of 9 is 3, so I bring it out and multiply it times the negative 2. So I have negative 2 times 3, and then the radical sign, and then the 5. 5 has to stay in. So negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, the radical sign, and the 5. Final answer. Okay, number 7 says 7 times the square root of 72. So this means 7 times the square root, and I happen to know 36 goes into 72 2 times. Well, 36 is a perfect square. The square root of 36 is 6. So that means I'm going to take that 7 in front, multiply it by the 6 that I'm taking out, the square root of 36, but the 2 stays in. So 7 times 6 is 42, radical 2, or times the square root of 2. Final answer. Number 8, negative 6 times the square root of 45. Now remember above, negative 6 times the square root, and 9 times 5 is 45. And I know the square root of 9 is 3, so I take that negative 6 times the 3, multiply it times radical 5. So negative 6 times 3 is negative 18 times radical 5. Okay, now we're going to try multiplying a radical times a radical. And the thing that I always tell everybody to remember, the rule is outside times outside, inside times inside. So when there's no number outside, that means 1. So 3 times 1 is 3, and the inside is radical 3 times radical 2 is radical 6. Easy. Okay, this next one, outside times outside would be 3 times 1 is 3, and radical 5 times radical 3, inside times inside, is 15. Believe it or not, 15 cannot be simplified. Okay, outside times outside gives us a 5. Inside times inside is 10 times 2, or 20. Okay, that one can be simplified because 20 is 4 times 5. So I'm going to circle my 4. And the square root of 4, remember, is 2. So 5 times 2 is 10, and this 5 has to stay under the radical sign. And number 12, we're going to go outside times outside, which is 6, and radical 3 times radical 3 means radical 9. Well, what's the square root of 9? That's right, it's 3. So 6 times 3 is 18. Okay, let's look at number, oops, that's pretty big. Let's look at number 14. Now we have a division problem. One thing to remember in division of radicals is a radical in the denominator, in the bottom, is never, ever allowed. So it's a little bit different than improper fractions, where when you learned about improper fractions, your teacher said, always turn it into a mixed number, never leave it improper. This is a little bit different than that, because I can honestly say we never leave it like this. So if this is the answer to your problem, you must do something with it. Now the good news is, in order to get rid of radical 2 in the denominator, all we do is multiply it by itself. Well, if I multiply the bottom of my fraction by radical 2, you know the rule, you must do the same in the top. So when I multiply my fraction by radical 2 over radical 2, that's the same as multiplying it by 1. Okay, so in the top, outside times outside is 1. Inside times inside gives me radical 20. Outside times outside is going to give me radical 4, which I already know what it is. The square root of 4 is 2. And square root of 20, because it's 4 times 5, is 2 root 5. 4 times 5. And the square root of 4 is 2. These cancel because 2 over 2 equals 1, and our answer is the square root of 5. Simplified. So this whole thing just is the square root of 5. Let's look at the next one. The top and the bottom, remember we need to multiply by radical 3 in order to get rid of that denominator. So we're going to do that first. And on top we're going to get 4 root 6, 2 times 3. And on the bottom, radical 3 times radical 3 is radical 9, which is just 3. Okay, number 15, let's multiply the top and the bottom by radical 2. And on the top, we're going to get 16 radical 2. And on the bottom, radical 2 times radical 2 is radical 4, which is just plain old 2. Always check these two numbers. 16 divided by 2, you're right, it's 8. So 8 radical 2 is our final answer. Okay, on number 16, top and bottom have radical 3, so I can cancel those out because that equals 1, and our answer is just 12. Now, a little review of solving our proportions. Remember what that was about. Solving proportions, remember how we did it? Cross multiply. 3 times v looks like this, and 9 times 6. So 3 times v equals 54. Does 3 go into 54? Try it in your calculator. I think you'll say it goes in 18 times. So v must be 18. So 9 is to 3 as 18 is to 6. Let's cross multiply this one. R times 5 is written as 5r, a number before the letter, equals 4 times 7, which is 28. Divide both sides by 5, and r will equal 28 fifths. So you could go ahead and put that in your calculator, and let's say it's going to go in 5 point, let's see, we're going to have, 30 left over, 5.6 if you put it in your calculator. Okay, let's not forget, we've got to put that in parentheses, so 6 times the whole denominator here, so it looks like 6 times b minus 6 equals 5 times 7, I'll write that out this first time, it's just 35. Distribute your 6, 6b minus 6 times 6 is 36, equals 35. Add 36 to both sides, and 6b is going to equal a positive 71. Yep, 71. So b would equal 71 divided by 6 when I divide both sides by 6. Let's see, 7 and 1. Okay, that's all I think I can do there. I'm going to get out of this red. Okay, let's cross multiply. Oh, look it, we have the same number here. 7 times 7 is 49, equals 8 times the quantity, remember, put it in parentheses, v plus 6. So 49 equals 8v plus 48. Let's subtract 48 from both sides, and we'll get 1 equals 8v. Let's divide both sides by 8, and v is going to equal 1/8. Okay, let's do our cross multiplying. 6 times p equals 5 times the quantity of p plus 2. So we have 6p equals 5p plus 10. Okay, let's subtract 5p from both sides, and we'll get 1p equals 10. So p equals 10. And over here on number 22, we're going to cross multiply. So 5 times x equals 10 times the quantity of x minus 6. Or 5x equals 10x minus 10 times 6 is 60. Subtract 10x from both sides, and we have a negative 5x equals a negative 60. Divide both sides by negative 5, and x equals negative divided by a negative is a positive 12. Okay, work on your homework. your assignment, which is page 6 and 7 in your packet. Look back at the video if necessary. We will be having a formative quiz, which will come from these homework problems and tomorrow's homework problems on Friday.